Well, talking season is here, and with that comes rankings. Duke football, their position in the conference, according to Locked On, might be a little too low. By the hype, Duke football might be making some noise here in 2025.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. Thanks so much for watching us each and every day here on Locked On Blue Devils. Today is Friday, July 11th, 2025. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. We got to talk about these Locked On rankings that we've had within our network itself. We've got conference rankings due up on the show with Kevin Connelly from Ball Durham. We'll dive into that here in just a moment. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Watch us each and every day on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like this video. Share it with your friends. Your support means so much to us here in the world of Locked On Blue Devils. Thank you for what you do. Shout out to all the everydayers that are out there. So without further ado, we'll bring on my man, Kevin Connelly from Ball Durham, who's back with us once again. Kevin, I hope that you were doing well, my friend. How are things in your world?
I'm good, JJ. How about yourself?
Can't complain. Like I said, talking season is here. We've got media days for the ACC here in just over a week. That'll take place in Charlotte. So it feels like it's football time, man. The conversations are had both at a college and NFL level. So it's always fun summertime, man. I feel like throughout the city and town, more and more people are getting fired up for football season.
Yeah, we're in mid-July now. Training camps are right around the corner. NFL training camps, some of them start next week. College football training camps, they'll be here before you know it as well. So if you like talking ball, now's a good time for you to really rev up the engines.
So we've got some ACC rankings that I want to dive into here from Locked On today's show. I do want to talk just quickly the conference at large. 17 schools now make up this ACC. And I go back just 2 seasons ago, what Florida State was able to do in a conference. Feels like over the last decade, Clemson has ran this football conference with Dabo Swinney leading the charge there as their head coach. Florida State goes undefeated in the conference, wins the championship. Obviously, they had quarterback injuries take place, but in the last year of the 4-team college football playoff, they were left out. Alabama takes that last spot in the CFP. Fast forward the next year, the one that just concluded in 2024, college football made the decision to expand to a 12-team playoff. You add SMU, Cal, and Stanford. SMU comes in, and they're one of the teams that gets a spot to make it into the college football playoff. They kicked Alabama out of that spot after Alabama stole a spot from Florida State. We won't talk about what took place on the field for Florida State last year because it was pretty disastrous. But as I've just kind of summarized the last 24 months or so of ACC football, where do you sit with all this, Kevin?
It's tough, right? Because at least when you brought up the playoff from 2 years ago, and I certainly understand both sides of the argument, right? I certainly understand Florida State not getting in because of Jordan Travis's injury. And now you look at it fast forward to the present day, and because of that injury, Jordan Travis is now retired from football after he spent the past couple of seasons with the New York Jets, but on IR and not being able to practice. And I also understand the fact that, hey, they still won all their games and they deserve a spot to be in the playoff. So I get that. And then, as you said, you fast forward now to a 12-team playoff, and the ACC gets a pair of teams in with Clemson and SMU. And obviously it was the debate. Like SMU, what were they, 11-2, I think, going into Selection Sunday with a loss against BYU and then losing in the ACC championship game to Clemson, who probably would not have made it in if not for winning that game. Yeah. I don't think the Tigers are in. I think Alabama gets in if SMU wins that championship game. Obviously, you say that in hindsight because SMU still got in over Alabama on Selection Sunday. So it's tough. Like I think you mentioned Florida State. I think they're going to be better I think there's questions with Miami. If you remember Miami, people thought that Miami was going to be a top 4 seed late in the year last year, and then they started to falter. And people had questions about SMU. Can SMU replicate the same success with perhaps a more difficult schedule this year than they had last year? And then I think Clemson right now is your clubhouse leader in terms of the favorite for the ACC, just because you're returning your quarterback and you're returning other key players around your team. But when you talk about projections and how we think teams are going to fare throughout the season, that one position kind of everybody looks at, and these rankings are kind of based off of, is that signal caller. And Clemson's got not only one of the best in the conference, but one of the best in the country, it seems, on paper.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are going to watch Cade Klubnik play on Sundays at some point in his career. In this conference, you mentioned Clemson and SMU being a part of the college football playoff a year ago. Miami had a pretty solid year until they started to fall off towards the end, but they were led by Cam Ward, who ultimately turns in to be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. We'll see his rookie career get started with the Titans here in just a few short months. But the quarterback position is just so pivotal when we look at all of these things. Now we've got the conference rankings up. Clemson's there with Klubnik, like we said. Miami spins pretty big. They bring Carson Beck over from Georgia, who got injured towards the end of the year. But Carson Beck, many people thought he wouldn't even be playing in college football this year. They felt like, oh, he's definitely going to already be in the NFL off of a big run at Georgia. It's a benefit, I think, that Miami's going to be able to have Carson Beck as their guy.
Well, JJ, I think you got to look at that twofold. I think, yes, number one, and I'm just going off the top of my head here, I think people thought Carson Beck could be the top quarterback taken off the board in this past year's NFL draft.
Certainly, yeah.
Like, that was kind of the hype. Like, he was maybe not necessarily the number 1 overall pick, but perhaps the number 1 quarterback. And, most of the times in the NFL draft, the number 1 overall pick is the number 1 overall quarterback, just because that's how the NFL is nowadays. And he doesn't have the year a lot of people were expecting. And then obviously you fast forward to the end of the year, and then the elbow injury. I don't have the specifics, but kind of like a Tommy John-esque injury where I think he got hurt in the SEC championship game and obviously doesn't play in the playoffs in that loss to Notre Dame. And we haven't seen him since then. Yeah. We have not seen him since that injury, and now he comes over to Miami. And I think obviously number 1 is the question marks about what is his health like? What is his arm going to be like? Does he have that same power and velocity in his arm to make some of these throws? And then you look at number 2, and it's more like, okay, yes, the injury questions are there, but when he was on the field for Georgia last year before the injury, the production was not what anybody expected. He was not having a good year. And I think, could there be questions about how much was his head in it because of NIL? And I think I'm remembering, I believe it was him, an interview in which he said someone was asking him about watching games and does that help him in film study? And he kind of was like, I don't watch football games outside of watching film and playing football. And I think the first time I heard that, and this was pre-injury, that's probably the biggest red flag, I think, to NFL executives and GMs. And then you're trying to connect the dots where it's like, okay, does this kid really love football and really love to play football? Or is he just really naturally gifted at it and it helps pay his bills and put food on the table for him and his family down the future? Because obviously he got a big-time NIL deal at Georgia, and he's getting an even bigger NIL deal now playing for Miami. So I think there's a lot of questions, not necessarily about the Miami football team as a whole, but at their most important position on the field in quarterback with Carson Beck.
Yeah, and I want to get to Duke at some point. We're going to do that after this first break on the show. I don't want to spend too much time on Georgia because they're here in the SEC, but looking at Carson Beck, the injury is going to be such a tough thing to overcome. I think he can do it. I think he's going to be set up for a position to do that at Miami. But think about Georgia. What was so crazy, and you go back to that game in the playoff against Notre Dame, who were able to claim, in other sports within the conference, but we can't claim Notre Dame in football. They want to hold on to their independence. Georgia is a team that led the country in drops last year at the wide receiver position. Talking season is here, and as soon as Kirby Smart takes the podium in Atlanta at SEC Media Days, again, I'm not going to spend too much time on Georgia because they're not in the conference here, but to defend our guy Carson Beck, if we're defending the ACC, Kevin, yes, he had some down games and whatnot, but he also didn't have anybody to catch the football. Brock Bowers was a rookie in the NFL, man. And I think we took a little bit of that for granted.
I'm very familiar with that, JJ, just finishing this point, because my New York Jets took Arian Smith in the NFL draft this year, and he was I think he had the most drops around the country last year.
Right. I mean, wow. So we'll see how that transpires for Carson Beck in Miami. But Duke, you saw where they were ranked just a moment ago. Excited about what they could do in the conference this year. Let's continue our conversation in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. That's right. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're having your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I've loved how much you can track all the categories within Monarch Money. It helped me figure out just how much in the world I was spending on things like food delivery. Now I'm able to budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Monarch Money is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, let's keep this thing rolling. He's Kevin Connelly. I'm JJ Jackson. We're talking about these ACC rankings that Locked On's put together for us and where Duke is positioned going into the year. 17 teams. You see Duke on your screens there at number 6. For our audio listeners, Clemson, Miami, Louisville, Georgia Tech, SMU, the squads ahead of the Blue Devils there. Big question mark for Duke. We mentioned signal callers being so important. The reports that are out there, Duke spitting the most money on any quarterback in America as they say farewell to Malik Murphy. He's off to Oregon State. Now it's time for Darian Mensah to enter the conversation.
Well, JJ, I don't want to dispute anybody's reporting because I know there's multiple reports out there. But when you look at teams that were going after quarterbacks in the portal, we just talked about Miami. There are others out there. The fact that the reports are that Duke spent the most on a guy like Darian Mensah, who, don't get me wrong, he was a really good quarterback at Tulane. But the fact that they spent the most, it had me scratching my head a little bit. But we kind of seen, obviously, the emphasis that Manny Diaz put on quarterback. It's an emphasis at no matter what level of football you're talking about on the quarterback. And obviously going out and getting Malik Murphy, I think in the first 2 weeks after he was hired as head coach last year. And then about 1 week into the offseason this year, they go out and get Darian Mensah. So obviously they know how important the quarterback position is. And they don't have a budget to get a quarterback. They know the quarterback's the most important position on the field. And obviously you have to imagine they feel pretty good about what they have in Darian Mensah so far through the offseason entering fall camp.
Yeah, you look at Duke offensively at wide receiver. Jordan Moore did everything for the Blue Devils last year. Eli Pankel was a big-time target who's run out of eligibility. So now you're asking guys that were in the room previously, like Samir Hagans, like Quayshawn Brown, to step up. And then Duke goes out into the transfer portal. They get a former SEC wide receiver from Oklahoma and Andrew Anthony to come in, another Ivy League guy joining the mix in Cooper Barkate. So for Mensah to be successful, Duke did the right thing in finding some weapons around him. Now it's just a matter of those guys in larger roles. Now's your time to shine and help this quarterback out.
Well, JJ, and I think that's a good point that you bring up, because I think what you saw at the early part of last season could potentially help this team this season. Last season, Duke was not crisp. They were not clean through the early parts of the season. And that was kind of to be expected coming into the year, because you have a new head coach, you have a whole new regime, you have new players, you have a new quarterback. They're trying to learn a new system. And now Manny Diaz didn't necessarily build that schedule for Duke, but I think it was a good soft landing. Yeah. Elon, Northwestern, Connecticut, Middle Tennessee, and then a struggling North Carolina team, which we didn't think was necessarily going to struggle that bad throughout the duration of the season. And you look at, okay, they lost a tough game on the road against Georgia Tech. They're a 2-point conversion away from beating SMU and keeping SMU out of the playoff, because if Duke wins that game, unless the Mustangs would have beaten Clemson in the ACC championship game, they don't get into to the playoff, and then kind of a wild game on the road against Miami when you look back at it. So I think it was an incredibly successful season for Manny Diaz. You saw things kind of gel and come together later in the season. But the makings of a good team is when you're still able to win ball games when you're not playing at your best. And Duke was not playing at their best at the beginning of last season, but they still found a way to go 5-0 to begin the season. And that really ugly win against Northwestern, I think, was a catalyst in all that. So I'm interested to see this season with kind of a similar start to the year, like a bye game against Elon to get you started. Then you face an Illinois team from the Big Ten, which is going to be a really good game, and that's at home. Then, obviously, a big game that everybody has circled on the schedule. A Saturday night, you go to Tulane, where Darian Mensah faces his former team, and then you go in right into ACC play, and you get NC State at home. So you look at Duke, and I know they're picked sixth right here, and I know out of the first four games, only one of them is in conference. But I think the first four games, very similar to last year, is going to set the tone for how this Duke season could unfold this season.
I hate that you brought up the SMU game, Kevin, because Duke fans are still having horrors from that one, right, where they're able to win in overtime. It's unbelievable still to this day for us, Kev, that SMU turned the football over 6 times. Duke didn't turn it over once. When do you ever go +6 in the turnover category and lose? Duke also missed 2 chip shot field goals, missed an extra point. It still hurts, but SMU will take that win because they got into the playoff.
Well, yeah, there you go. But you mentioned, and yes, the 6 turnovers, and you mentioned those 2 missed field goals. They don't go as turnovers on the stat sheet, but they're just as good as turnovers.
Right.
You got a chance to score and take some momentum, and you miss a field goal, and all the momentum goes to the other team. So, that's a tough game. But like I said, you're 2 points away from winning that game, being really in contention to go to the ACC championship game, and in the process, you knock SMU eventually out of the playoff.
All right, we got to talk about that team down the road as well. We've got them locked on here, North Carolina at 15. You're the Jets guy. You're up there in the Northeast, Kevin. You're so familiar your entire life with AFC East football at the NFL. And on those sidelines has been one Mr. Bill Belichick. Now he's in Chapel Hill. What in the world is happening here? And it's not been the best of off seasons so far leading into year one. Maybe he'll prove us all wrong, but in these preseason rankings, we're not too high on North Carolina locked on.
Listen, JJ, for most of my life, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick have been the bane of my existence as a Jets fan. Let me just say that to start. But, I don't think anyone could have predicted everything transpiring around North Carolina football and Bill Belichick since he's been hired, and he still hasn't coached a football game yet with his girlfriend and Jordan Hudson and the CBS interview and so on and so forth. So that's kind of crazy to begin with. However, let me say this, and I haven't necessarily done a very deep dive in North Carolina's roster.
Why would you?
Exactly. But 15th, and I'm just going this solely on the coaching pedigree and history of Bill Belichick. And I know it's different from the NFL to college football, although you're getting more similarities now that players are getting paid and compensated and so on and so forth. And I know Bill Belichick's time in the New England Patriots came to a rocky ending, not having the best seasons after post-Tom Brady with Mac Jones. But 15th in these rankings, deep down in my heart, when you look at some of the teams ahead of them, and I know they have good players and good coaches, Bill Belichick's going to win games, man. He's going to win games just on his mind alone, just on some of his schemes alone. 15th, I get it. Maybe they don't have the highest rated recruits and prospects in the world, but I just think that Bill Belichick, with his coaching acumen and the staff that he's built and how he's going to run that program, I know there's been distractions this offseason. I just think he's going to win games because that's what he's done his entire career.
Yeah, once it comes down to football is football, and there's clearly no one smarter than Mr. Belichick for sure. All right, let's take one more break here on the program today, start to wrap up our conversation with Kevin Connelly when Locked On Blue Devils continues here in just a moment. Thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen and your first watch here today. For your second listen, do yourself a favor and make sure that you check out The Portal Show. Locked On's very own Brian Smith has you covered on all the big changes taking place across college football, talking all things college football transfer portal, these rankings that we've got, so much more. Go check out the Portal Show. Also, do yourself a favor and check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts. My guy Kevin Connelly is here with us on the show today as we start to wrap up our program. Be remiss if we didn't keep people up to date on what took place last night in the world of Duke basketball. We saw the Summer League debut of one Mr. Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg versus Bronny James, the big headlines everybody was talking about. Inefficient is definitely the definition of what we saw from Cooper Flagg, going 5 of 21 from the floor in his debut, but definitely had an impact on the game, had assists, had rebounds, did a little bit of everything. It's a summer league game. I don't want people to overreact. Duke fans know not to overreact, but this was just another indicator. Reality is setting in, man. He was wearing a Mavericks uniform. Like, the Duke days are unfortunately done for Cooper Flagg.
Yeah, listen, it was an ugly start in those first 4 minutes. He got a breather, came back, really found his stride. But I mean, he said it. He didn't play good. Like, he didn't. But like, it's summer league.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not reading much into it. You saw the ability. You saw the potential. You saw him execute certain times. Yeah, he did. He facilitated. He rebounded. He played defense, and he scored a little bit. Didn't shoot the ball necessarily well. You saw some hesitation in the shot, but it's summer league. We're not reading too deep into it. He's going to be fine. Jason Kidd was there. Kyrie Irving was there. He's probably going to be a starter on opening night in the regular season for the Dallas Mavericks. So it was cool to see him out there. There was a lot of buzz in the arena, obviously, out in Vegas. I think it was sold out with Bronny James on the other side, who's one of the most polarizing young players in the NBA. And Cooper Flagg is now one of the most popular young players in the NBA already, even though he hasn't played an official NBA game yet. So it was cool to see some of the other guys. DJ Stewart was also on the floor for the Lakers. He had 14 points in the game. Justin Robinson behind the Los Angeles Lakers bench. So it was a little bit of a Duke flair on the floor in that Lakers-Mavs game the other night.
Not to mention former Duke women's basketball star Lindsey Harding with her number 10 jersey up in the rafters in Cameron, the head coach right now of the Summer League squad. She was an assistant all last season for J.J. Redick. So that was really cool to see. Kevin, it is great to see you always, man. Tell us about Ball Durham and how people can be tapped in with you.
Yeah, Ball Durham, we got everything you could want. Summer League, football, basketball, the guys on the current team. We got you over at balldurham.com. Best way to support us is come read us every single day. And again, that's balldurham.com. Be
well, Kevin. We'll talk to you again soon, okay?
All right, JJ, thanks.
All right, that's Kevin Connelly joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Always appreciate his time with us here on the show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you again soon. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.